Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of Iconic Freedom, The Formula. Here we set a standard for accountability and responsibility, the ownership of your choices and your outcomes and everything that follows. Let each care for self and all will be cared for. So when I talk about the formula, we talk about that periodic chart that you see on the various websites that this is posted on, where you create those elements that come together and bring harmony to your life. And if one of those elements in your life is not working, then you extract it and you reevaluate it and, again, bring that harmony to your life. This week, we're going to talk about something that I think affects every relationship you'll ever have. Not love, not trust, not communication, observation, or perhaps more accurately, our inability to observe clearly. Because I think many of the struggles that people experience with others don't begin with what happened. They begin with what was imagined, what was assumed, what was projected onto the other person, or what was hoped for with regards to that person, that individual, whatever it is. And nowhere does that create more suffering that I've observed than in our relationships. Because most suffering doesn't come from loving people. Most suffering comes from loving who we hoped they would become. And that's a very, very different thing. There's a peculiar kind of pain that many people experience that I observe. And, I've observed it at different times in my life. Not because reality was hidden from them or from myself, but because reality was competing with an image, an idea, with hope. And, the image, idea, and hope, it won, at least for a while. And we've all done it. I mean, we meet someone, we admire them, we care about them, we see potential in them. And before long, we begin relating not to who they are, but to who we believe they could become. If only they healed, if only they matured, if only they recognized their potential, if only they changed. And what begins, I think, as optimism slowly becomes an attachment to a future that doesn't exist. Now, don't misunderstand. Potential is real. Human beings are capable of extraordinary things. But potential is not reality. Relationships are experienced through behavior. Not possibilities, not promises, not intentions, but from behavior. And I think one of the most difficult lessons in life is learning to separate those things. Because so many people spend years loving potential while reality sits in front of them waiting to be acknowledged. And perhaps nowhere is this, I think, more obvious than in our ability to explain away patterns. Human beings are fascinating creatures. Right? We can witness the same behavior repeatedly and still convince ourselves that it means something different. We see inconsistency, we call it stress. We see dishonesty, we call it confusion. We see avoidance, we call it fear. We see repeated behavior over and over, and instead of accepting the pattern, accepting the reality, we explain it. We defend it, rationalize it, negotiate with it. And eventually, I think we become exhausted with it. And it's not because reality was difficult. It's not. But it's because we kept arguing with reality. Now, something occurred to me while I was out riding my bike recently, and it's a simple example of how we project onto people. The kind of thing that I think most people would overlook, but I like to break this down because if you can do this with your daily interactions with people, maybe not all the time, but enough that you start to recognize when you're doing it, then I think that's a great step. I personally think that's a great step towards your own self-evaluation, self-correction, and your personal development. I'm walking down a path. Someone approaches, I smile and say, "Good morning." Maybe they smile back. Maybe they return the greeting. Maybe they don't. Maybe they simply walk past without saying a word. Now let's stop there. So what happened? Reality says, I said good morning. They did not respond. That's all. That's the entire event. But watch what happens next. The mind begins creating meaning. They're rude. They're arrogant. They're unfriendly. They don't like me. People have no manners anymore. None of that was observed, right? It was created. And if I muttered under my breath, and if you've ever done this, you know what I'm talking about. Well, good morning to you too. Something very important has happened. We're no longer talking about them. We're talking about me. I'm talking about myself. Because I've revealed an expectation I didn't even know I had. I expected a response. I expected reciprocity. I expected a specific outcome. And when reality failed to honor my expectation, I experienced disappointment. But the disappointment wasn't created by reality. It was created by my attachment, right, to the outcome. Now, notice something else. If I enjoy saying good morning to people, if the act itself is complete the moment I say it, then whether they respond or not changes nothing. The choice was mine. Their choice is theirs. And I cannot know the reason they didn't respond. Maybe they didn't hear me. Maybe they're distracted. Maybe they're grieving. Maybe they're anxious. Maybe they're simply having a bad day, or maybe they're rude. I don't know. Maybe. But it doesn't matter to me. I don't want to get into their head. It's too crazy in everybody's head, right? And neither do you. But the moment we create certainty where observation does not exist, we leave reality and we enter into projection. And that projection creates an emotion. When you're in emotion, you're out of reality. And this is where I think so much suffering begins, because people will often ask, why do I keep getting hurt by people? And sometimes the answer is uncomfortable, because sometimes the hurt wasn't created by what happened. Sometimes it was created by the story we attached to what happened. This doesn't mean people don't lie, because they do. And it doesn't mean that people don't manipulate, because they do. It doesn't mean that harmful behavior should be ignored, because it should not. What it means is that clarity requires accuracy, and accuracy requires observation, not fantasy, not wishful thinking, not emotional storytelling, but observation, clean observation, out of emotion into reality. One of the most important principles I've ever discussed on this podcast is stop looking for the good in everything. Seek reality instead. Because when people are told to always look for the good, they often stop looking for what's true, what is reality. And reality will contain both of those identifiers that you want to have about someone's behavior: good, bad, happy, sad, whatever. Reality contains strengths and weaknesses, integrity and inconsistency, wisdom and immaturity, kindness and selfishness. The goal isn't to see people negatively or to see people positively. The goal is to interact in your universe with the world in accuracy. Because acceptance is not agreement. Acceptance is accurate observation. And one of the most peaceful moments in life, I think, occurs when you stop trying to turn people into projects. You stop trying to manage their growth. You stop trying to negotiate reality. You stop trying to engineer someone's awakening. I have had that wake-up call in the last 4 or 5 years like you wouldn't believe. And I stop. I don't need to. I do not need to fix anyone. I need only observe what's in my universe and decide what choices do I want to make in the face of it. And instead, for you and me, we simply observe. We're not judgmental. Honestly, you let behavior speak. You let patterns reveal themselves. You allow people, I say, to be exactly who they are. Let them reveal who they are and then decide what role they will occupy in your life. Allow people to be exactly who they are, and then you decide what role they will occupy in your life. Maturity isn't about becoming cynical. Maturity is becoming accurate, seeing clearly, observing honestly, and accepting reality with needing to improve it before acknowledging it. And maybe that's the lesson underneath all of this, is that the suffering isn't always what they did. The suffering comes from how long we argued with reality about what was presented. How long we negotiated with the patterns. Some people do it a lifetime, folks. I mean, you know this and I know it. You see people that they have done this a lifetime. How long did, we love the possibility of somebody more than their behavior? And I think that brings us to this week's thought process. Most suffering comes from loving who we hoped someone would become. Not because hope is wrong, but because reality is where life is actually happening. Maybe wisdom isn't learning how to judge people better. Maybe wisdom is learning how to observe them more honestly, without projection, without fantasy, without wishful thinking. Because clarity doesn't remove you from humanity. It changes how you participate within it. So for this week, if you are inclined, think about it. Take one of those moments, like my walking past somebody and saying good morning, and then analyze it for yourself after you've walked past it. Let it be small, let it be large, whatever, but let it be small to begin with. And then ask yourself, what was your reaction? And what were you expecting or anticipating? Because expecting and anticipating is an attachment to an outcome. I know this is the minutia of living, but if you get this, believe me, it will change your life on a dime. Because it will open up the window for you of responsibility, your decision to choice to responsibility. I have a responsibility to whatever goes on, and I am accountable for the outcome and everything that follows. You get that, and I guarantee you will have a life and a journey of happiness that you never thought possible. Okay, hit that like button if you would. Share it with your family and friends. You never know how it might support them in their endeavor. All the fun links are below, and if you're inclined, feel free to subscribe on Buzzsprout. I am on X and Truth Social, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. The link to my newest book, The Christmas Cookie, Stories from the Counter, is listed below. I'd be grateful and honored if you chose to pick up a copy. It's a collection of heartwarming stories that I quietly say unfold the very principles that we talk about here each week. And until next time, stay sharp, stay sovereign, and as always, remember, let each care for self, and all will be cared for. Make it a great week.